Hello everybody, it's Sarah, and let's hope that in this video I won't constantly go out of focus like in the last one, because that was kind of annoying, not gonna lie. But anyway, today I wanted to share with you my most disappointing books of 2020. This is part of my yearly wrap-up series, where I first of all talk about my stats as well as looking back at my goals for the year. I already uploaded that video, so that will be linked down below and up there. Then I of course talk about my most disappointing books, although usually that video is wrapped up with my worst books. However, in 2020 I read so many books that it warrants an extra list. Then I talk about my most surprising books, my worst books, as well as my best books. And so the other three videos are still coming towards you in the next 1 or 2 weeks. But yeah, today is the most disappointing books, and what do I mean by that? Most disappointing books for me aren't necessarily bad books. In fact, I have a book right here that is a 4-star, or that was a 4-star. However, disappointing for me is just kind of like, you know, my expectations for the books were here and the reality was kind of here or maybe here, and I was really bummed out by that. And I actually have to call myself out a little bit, because I noticed while gathering these books that most of the books that I have on this list are diverse books. So they are BIPOC or LGBT books. And I think the reason for that is because usually I'm really interested in these books and I really want to read them, and I have way too high expectations apparently, and then the reality of the book a lot of times can't necessarily keep up. And so that's definitely something that I will have to adjust within 2021, that I'm not that disappointed if, you know, my expectations aren't met by those books, because these books have it hard enough as it is, so I don't need to add to the negativity. These books get a lot of times simply because they're not white cis het books. And yeah, but I do still want to read about them, and as I said, my most disappointing books aren't necessarily bad books, they just didn't meet my expectations and weren't necessarily for me. First, I want to go through a few sequels that disappointed me this year. The first one is one that I read only recently in December, and that was The Lost Book of the White by Cassandra Clare and Wesley Chu. This is the second book in the Eldest Curses series, which is kind of a spin-off series of the Shadowhunter Chronicles, following Magnus and Alec, and each book is kind of set at a different place in the Shadowhunters timeline. So the first book was after City of Glass, and this book is set after City of Heavenly Fire. And I at first didn't have too high expectations for this series. I kind of feel like I have grown out of the Shadowhunters world a little bit by this point. However, I did really enjoy, against my expectations, Chain of Gold this year, and I also really enjoyed the first book, The Red Scrolls of Magic, within this series this year. So I did have expectations that I would at least have a fun time with this book. However, I found it really dull and boring. I really wasn't that invested in the characters that I love so much usually, and I do really love Magnus and Alec. They are two of my favorite characters within like the Mortal Instruments cast. Like, not within the entirety of the Shadowhunters cast. Magnus maybe not Alec, but definitely within the Mortal Instruments cast, so I do enjoy following those two characters. However, as I said, I just really wasn't invested in the characters in this one. I didn't have this kind of nostalgia feeling of going back to some of my favorite characters, and then also the writing was just bad in my opinion. And you know, I wouldn't necessarily put it on my worst list for 2020, because I have talked about this a lot already. I am a big nostalgia reader, so nostalgia is gonna get plus points from me in any case. So it's not a worst book, but it definitely was a very disappointing read. Then next, I probably have the most disappointing read for me from 2020, and that is Queen's Bargain by Anne Bishop. This was a 4-star read for me because, again, nostalgia is big with this one. This is my favorite series of all time. I love the characters. I can like read anything by them. But the expectations were high because this is the first book I got in a series after like 7 or 8 years, I think. I think the last one was published in 2013. And you know, this is my favorite series of all time. I have loved this series and these characters since I was 12 years old. But first of all, what is this about? What is this book? This is the 10th book and the newest book in the Black Jewels series. The Black Jewels kind of consists of the original trilogy, which follows this prophecy, kind of. It doesn't follow the prophecy, but there's this world where there's this prophecy about this girl that will come and that will make everything all right, kind of like a chosen one deal. And we follow a few characters waiting for the arrival of the chosen one and kind of how the arrival of the chosen one changes their lives. And then after the original trilogy, you have, I mean, now you have 7 books, but you had 6 books that were kind of spin-off novels that were one-off stories set in the world, mostly following the same characters, and just seeing the day-to-day lives and the smaller battles these characters had to fight. And I always really enjoyed those stories, almost more than the original trilogy. And this is the newest one, and I was so excited for it. Obviously, otherwise it wouldn't be on my most disappointing reads of 2020 list. But I just kind of felt let down. Not really by the story. I really enjoyed the story, and a lot of the main characters were still the characters that I very much loved. But there was one specific main character, the main character that is my favorite character in the entire series. My second favorite character in the entire series. But that's my second favorite character in the entire series. And, you know, I just found the characterization of that character really off. And she did a lot of things within the novel that I found really out of character for her, and that just made me really sad. And that's why this is on my most disappointing reads of 2020 list. Not because I didn't absolutely love it, but because I didn't absolutely love it as much as I thought I would love it. However, I'm still really excited for the next book that's coming out in March. Next, let's talk about a category of books that really, after the second disappointment within that category, I should have stopped picking up more books. But I seemingly haven't learned anything, because I have also like put some books in that category on my most anticipated 2021 releases list. But that category is YA sapphic standalone high fantasy. Although I think my disappointment more has to do with the YA standalone fantasy part rather than the sapphic. I just always have the expectation that because it's sapphic, I'm gonna be interested enough that, you know, I'm gonna end up loving it anyway or really enjoying it anyway. But while not every book in that category was a dud, for example, I really enjoyed Girl Serpent Thorn, which is right here. Like, most of the books that I read in that category were big fat duds, and one book that I read in that category even made it on my worst books of 2020 list, but we're not gonna talk about that right now. Now we're gonna talk about the 3 books that made it onto my most disappointing list. And those 3 books are Cinderella is Dead, Queen of Coin and Whispers, as well as The Dark Tide. I'm first gonna talk about why I generally think this category isn't for me all that much, and then I'm gonna quickly summarize each of them and talk about some specific problems with them. And as I said, I think my problem is less the sapphic part, more the YA standalone, and that is because I do enjoy quite a bit of depth and complexity within my fantasies. And you know, if you have standalones, especially YA standalones, the likelihood that you have the time within the word count to go as much into in-depth in the world building, in the characters and so on, that I will enjoy it is like very low. I mean, I have read standalone fantasies that I enjoyed a lot. The Priory of the Orange Tree, Elantris, kind of also all the books in the Band series by Nicholas Ames, but those are all adult fantasy, and I don't think I have ever read a YA standalone that I really enjoyed, at least not recently. And so first, let's talk about Cinderella is Dead. This is, I don't want to call it a Cinderella retelling because it's really not. But this world kind of started with Cinderella and with the Cinderella story. And to honor her, every year there's this ball where girls have to go and they have to get chosen by a suitor that they then will marry. And if they don't go and if they aren't chosen, then they are forfeit. So we follow our main character, I think her name was Sophia. Yeah, Sophia, who is not at all interested in going to that ball. She doesn't want a husband, partially because she's in love with her childhood best friend. And so she's a lesbian. That's why she's not interested at all. And so we follow her, of course, as she tries to run away and as she tries to upturn that system. Now, why didn't I enjoy this book in particular, aside from, you know, the problems of complexity and so on? First of all, I just didn't find the romance all that compelling, I gotta be honest. And also, mainly, I found the main character really pushy and annoying. And there was this thing at the very beginning of the book where she is constantly mad at her crush best friend because her best friend won't run away with her. And I just found that a really, like, asshole move, because, you know, not every person is the type of person who can stand up to persecution. And her best friend obviously was a very insecure person. She was very worried about her family and so on, and our main character just wouldn't understand that. And I think you should never push other people into standing up, you know? I mean, maybe that's just me, but I think there's no use. Like, if another person doesn't feel like standing up, if they want to instead live in kind of this oppressed society, then you can't really change that. And so that just made our main character really unlikable for me, and so that's why I did not enjoy this specific book. Although something I really enjoyed is that there were a lot of tidbits. Even though I at first thought it's based on a Disney Cinderella only, there were a lot of tidbits from the original, like, fairy tale by the Brothers Grimm. Or I guess it's also a French fairy tale, but you know, from the original fairy tale. Then I had Queen of Coin and Whispers by Helen Corcoran. The reason why I didn't like this more specifically had to do with, like, the not enough space. Because I found this one had a lot of really amazing, you know, like, starting points kind of and aspects to it. But I felt because there wasn't the space and the author wanted to have, like, the romance, and she also wanted to have some action, and she also wanted to have a lot of politics. There were parts of everything in there, but nothing of it was in there to the depth that I wanted it to be there. And then there were also a lot of awkward time jumps that made the romance really feel very awkward, because you didn't really see the progression of the romance that much. So it wasn't insta-love because there were months in between, but it still felt like insta-love because you didn't see the characters fall in love with each other. And so yeah, I just felt like it was a good attempt, but ultimately not enjoyable for me, at least. But I think if you're into YA fantasy that's a little bit more political, I think this will definitely be for you. And then the last one is The Dark Tide by Alicia Jasinska, which I won't talk about too much. I also only read this in December and talked about it in my December wrap-up. And this one, I just, you know, my main problem with this was just that I felt like it was not bad, but it was ungood. You know, it just wasn't good, and I didn't enjoy it, and it felt rushed, and it felt like there wasn't enough depth, and the characters felt really bland, and the story felt really bland to me. And so yeah, these three are the YA sapphic high fantasy standalones that sadly just didn't make the cut for me. I would say, like, I mean, this one I gave 2.5 stars, so this one I actively didn't enjoy reading, but the other two I did give like solid 3 stars. They were enjoyable enough, but you know, there just wasn't anything there that would make me really enjoy them and really love them. Then let's talk about my last YA that made it onto my most disappointing list, and that is Scavenge the Stars by Tara Sim. And this is a Count of Monte Cristo retelling. The Count of Monte Cristo, of course, is this epic revenge story where you have a main character who was thrown into prison, or like into slavery in this case, kind of, because of something some other people did, and the character then goes on to this revenge story like thing, travel, journey, that's the word, journey. And yeah, I just, once again, there was nothing there in this book. And I DNF'd it at about 50%. And this book isn't even 300 pages long. So, you know, it was really dull for me to DNF it. There just wasn't anything there. I didn't really care about the characters. Nothing got started. It felt like nothing happened. And so, yeah, just wasn't for me. Was really disappointed because this was another one of the books that I was most excited for to get to within 2020, but yeah, it wasn't to be, I guess. But yeah, now we have 2 books left. The first of those is The Chronicles of the Bitch Queen by K.S. Veloso. Both books kind of, but more so the first book, which is The Wolf of Oran-Yaro. And the reason why this was so disappointing for me is like just the title of the series, The Chronicles of the Bitch Queen. I was expecting this kick-ass, amazing, smart woman who's just like, you know, seen as a bitch by everyone, but who also is just like, as I said, amazing and a hard-ass and kick-ass and just a strong female character in every sense of the word. Also, we're following a main character who is a mother, which, if you know me, you know I love that. However, while I did enjoy the story itself, I found said bitch queen to not at all be what I expect a bitch queen to be. Because she was whiny, she was stupid, she was annoying, she was constantly running after her husband who had left her 5 years beforehand, and just like, you know, just really not a strong character. And you know, you don't need to be kick-ass for me to think you're a strong character, but you know, maybe also rely on yourself every now and again, you know, just a little bit, and not every time you rely on yourself that be a stupid thing which gets you into trouble, which means you have to get saved by other people, you know. Also, maybe if you have been a queen for 5 years, show some political knowledge and savviness, which, you know, she doesn't have. But I enjoyed the second book a lot more already, and I think I'm gonna enjoy the last book, at least like marginally better than the second book. And I think overall I'm still gonna be happy with the trilogy and happy that I read it. And this is definitely not a case where I think this is a bad book. I'm just only talking about the bad stuff in this video of all the books, obviously, because it's my most disappointing books. I'm gonna talk about the bad stuff because I'm gonna talk about why these books were disappointing. But yeah, anyway, I still enjoyed the book, so it's like one of those solid 3 stars, more solid than the YA standalone fantasies. And yeah, I'm gonna look forward to reading the third book. And then the last book that was a disappointment for me in 2020 was the only book where it wasn't like my expectations were high at the beginning. I didn't really have any expectations, but then I really loved the book going into it. However, it then halfway through took a turn that, you know, I really didn't like. I really didn't like. And that was A Certain Ambiguity by Gaurav Suri and Hartosh Singh Bal. In this story, we follow a young Indian man who goes to America to study there. And while there, he discovers that his grandfather, who was a very famous mathematician, also spent time in America and in fact spent time in jail there. And while taking some mathematics courses himself, he tries to come behind why his grandfather was put in jail. And I absolutely loved the mathematics stuff in this. If you already have a basic understanding of concepts like high school levels understanding of mathematics, then the way the mathematics are explained within this book is so easy and so amazing, and I absolutely love it. There's also a lot of talk about like the concept of infinity within mathematics, which is also why, you know, the infinity symbol is on the cover. And I absolutely love that. I also really love the beginning of the grandfather story, which you kind of see not in flashbacks, but like in protocols of his time in prison, and the discussion he has as a mathematician with a very devout Christian. Because the reason why he was put into prison was the blasphemy law. I don't know, he said he didn't believe in God, and so he was thrown into prison. However, I really didn't like where those discussions then led. And again, I am like, I don't care if you're Christian or whatever. I have talked about it before. I am personally an atheist, but it doesn't mean I want to have, like, you know, religious discussions within my books. I don't typically enjoy that, usually. And like, you know, the comparisons that were made between mathematics and religion, it just kind of, you know, really annoyed me, because it felt kind of like a misunderstanding of what mathematics is, because mathematics, of course, has its set of rules, and there are certain rules that you kind of just have to assume are true, but those rules still usually can be proven right, you know. And also you do have different, like, you know, types of mathematics. You have Euclidean, and then you have non-Euclidean mathematics, and the rules that are true in Euclidean mathematics aren't necessarily true in non-Euclidean mathematics, and so on. But you know, within those systems of mathematics, all the rules are still very strict. And so I didn't like the fact that there's different systems of mathematics that you can use, then being compared with, well, you have to believe in mathematics, so mathematics basically is the same as religion, because you also just have to believe in religion. I just really didn't like that comparison, okay? Because science is not the same as religion. You're completely valid believing in whatever religion you want to believe in. I don't care. I truly cannot tell you how much I don't care what you believe, as long as you don't, like, make the lives of others shitty because of that. But to compare it to mathematics is... I cannot. I'm sorry, I cannot. This still upsets me so much, obviously. But yeah, I really don't want to get into theological, scientifical discussions in the comments, so please don't. But yeah, this is the reason why I absolutely did not like this book, or why it disappointed me, because I still love the mathematics part. I love the mathematics parts so much, so much. They were like 5 out of 5 stars for me. And yeah, that was it for my most disappointing books of 2020. Tell me in the comments down below if you have read any of these books, and if you were as disappointed as I was by them, or hopefully did you actually really enjoy them? Because again, I don't know, I think for some reason on BookTube there's this expectation that if people don't like books, that it's not done in good faith. But you know, I don't go and read books because I don't want to like them. I don't go out of my way to find reasons to not like books. I do generally wanna love books. But yeah, tell me in the comments down below if you have read any of these books, what your thoughts were on them. Also, all the links to my social media are in the description box down below, so go and check those out. All the links to my book club of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, where I read one adult high fantasy book written by a woman per month, are also in the description box down below. If you enjoyed this video, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. And I hope I'll see you soon with my most surprising books of 2020 video. Bye!